Hello everyone, I saw Bill and Ted Face the Music, and it was decent. So I never thought I'd be living in a year where the New Mutants gets released and we also get a third Bill and Ted movie. So Bill and Ted Face the Music is about Bill and Ted several years later, and no one cares about Wild Stallions anymore. So I guess the credits of Bill and Ted's bogus journey are no longer canon. And they're married to the princesses, and they have daughters of their own now. But they are visited from the future by Rufus's daughter, who tells them that they need to write the song that will unite the world, or the universe will collapse. So they travel through time to steal the song from themselves, while their daughters to travel through time to find musicians to form a band to help Bill and Ted make the song. Now, I love the first Bill and Ted movie, and I quite enjoyed Bogus Journey, even though it isn't quite as good as Excellent Adventure. And Bill and Ted Face the Music, while the weakest, is still a welcome addition to this franchise. So Bill and Ted are back together, and they still feel like Bill and Ted, and they still talk like they did back in 1989. But I get why they did that, because people watch this movie because they want to see Bill and Ted. And their daughters are basically doing Bill and Ted impersonations. Their daughters have their own quest where they pick up musicians like Jimi Hendrix, Louis Armstrong, and Mozart. But they don't completely sideline Bill and Ted's quest, as that is the main focus of the movie. Although it's kind of sad we don't get a scene like in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure where it's just the historical figures wrecking them all. Also, William Sadler's death is back. I mean, I know he's mostly back for fan service, but he is important, and you can't have Bill and Ted without him. It does have some issues. Like, remember how in the last two movies the future looked both futuristic but 80s at the same time? Well, in here the future looks like an Apple store. There's a robot that gets sent to kill Bill and Ted, but then he doesn't, and his personality becomes awkward and it gets a bit stale. In the beginning, they show how Bill and Ted are dependent on each other, but they don't really do much with it. This is a very minor issue, but it would have been nice if they called the movie something like Bill and Ted's Radical Return, or something like that to keep consistent, but I get why they called it Face the Music. Also, Keanu Reeves should just keep his beard, as it's clearly the sort of his longevity. Overall, this movie isn't a masterpiece or anything, but it's a fun way to kill 90 minutes. I'm not sure if I'd say it's worth the $20 to rent because I didn't spend any money to watch it, and I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. And then I saw the New Mutants, and honestly, I'm just surprised this movie has even come out at all, because it was scheduled to be released in 2018. Then it got delayed again and again for reshoots to make the movie scarier. But apparently these reshoots never happened, and the original movie is what we got. I just feel sorry for this movie. It went through a lot more trouble than Dark Phoenix did, and honestly, it wasn't worth the wait. The New Mutants is about these 5 teens in the quote-unquote hospital, and they have to fight to escape. Now, the premise for this movie is honestly quite good. Mutants with nightmare fuel powers being held in a secret facility against their will. Sounds pretty cool, right? Well, with the execution, it just isn't. I will say it was an incredibly bold move of Fox to advertise their gambling website, and even put in 2 ad breaks as well. And there's also these shadow creatures that showed up twice, but never really added much to the story. In all seriousness, this movie went through more hell than Dark Phoenix. But I think that movie turned out worse, because there's a lot I hate about Dark Phoenix. But this movie is just boring. Although that movie had James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. The plot takes forever to get going. The movie is forgettable. I can sum up the characters simply by archetypes. There's the bitch, the asshole, the nice guy, the nice girl, and the main character, and the evil doctor. That's it. None of them are interesting. The actors can't decide if they want to use accents or not. Anya Taylor-Joy's character sometimes has a Russian accent and sometimes she doesn't. This guy sometimes has a southern accent and sometimes he doesn't, but when he does, it's pretty funny. Also, while writing, I happened to realize that this series has both Sansa and Arya Stark, because Sophie Turner plays Jean Grey in the new timeline, and Maisie Williams is in this movie. Also, Peter Dinklage plays Trask in Days of Future Past. I know that has nothing to do with the New Mutants, but since we were talking about Game of Thrones actors in the X-Men series, I figured I'd just mention it. There's a romance between Danny, the main character, and Maisie Williams' character. It really doesn't go anywhere. However, I'd say that there's just a little more development to it than Negasonic and Yukio's relationship in Deadpool 2. Although that movie's way better than this. At one point, the movie remembers it's supposed to be a horror movie, and the characters got terrorized by these things that look like Slender Man but with a mouth. Also, I've heard there's no post-credit scene, but that doesn't matter because the camera I watched ended at the credits. Now I'm going to talk about spoilers. Not a lot, because there's not really much to talk about with this movie, but you know what to do. So this movie tries to tie itself into Logan because they show that footage from Logan of Transigen creating mutant children, and they finally acknowledge Essex Corp after the credit scene of Apocalypse, but they don't really do much of anything with it. And Danny's father tells her a legend where there's these two bears inside you. One represents positivity and the other represents negativity. And like the more you feed it, the bigger the bear gets or something. And then literally a giant bear shows up and the characters have to fight it because the movie remembers it's also a comic book adaptation. One thing I can say about this movie is that it doesn't feel like a typical X-Men movie. They tried something new, so there's that. I think they were going to expand upon the story with a New Mutants trilogy, but it's honestly quite sad that the X-Men series has been going on for literally 20 years, and it ends with just a mediocre horror movie that I watched in front of a monitor. I'm not joking when I say the gambling website ads were the most entertaining part. Overall, the New Mutants is just mediocre and forgettable. I don't think it's quite as bad as X-Men Origins Wolverine or Dark Phoenix, but it's quite low on my X-Men ranking and I don't think I will see it again. And I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. It's closer to a 4 than a 6. If you want to watch this movie, don't risk getting coronavirus. Instead, just pirate it. It's much safer and it will save you money. Also, before I go, I want to mention that in September you will see reviews for Tenet, and I'm thinking of ending things. And there will also be 2 ranking videos coming in early September, one being the X-Men ranking and the other being the Christopher Nolan ranking, so stay tuned for those.